This podcast is part of the Big Heads Media Podcast Network. Go to bigheadsmedia.com for more great podcasts. Well, hello everyone. Welcome back to Everybody Lies, our House MD podcast, the greatest. That's us falling into a bunch of used needles, I guess.
Jeez, not again.
But we are the greatest House MD podcast that exists. Fuck the other House MD podcast.
The other podcast is like the Brandon of the podcast world. If you know what I mean.
They are, absolutely. Just fucking losers. Sitting in their basements. Around their collective world. I think they're actually doctors. I don't know.
Yeah, probably.
But yeah, just a bunch of losers talking about House. But we're a couple of winners talking about House.
Yeah.
So this episode is entitled, do you remember, Mike?
I actually don't. I remember it is Control, right?
Yep, you got it. Yep.
Yeah, I remembered at the last second there, because I know you know the title for once in your fucking life.
Control. Yeah.
This one I watched very recently, like within the last 2 hours, so I really don't even need to refer to notes. I like this episode quite a bit. How'd you like it?
Yeah, this is, like I said, I like the storyline that starts in this episode, and I think this is a really good episode of the show, and I think it kind of shows different things that they can do with the framework of the show, where it doesn't just have to be, what disease is it? Let's figure it out at the very last minute kind of thing.
Right. Yeah, they're definitely tinkering with the formula in a good way.
Yeah, because there's a lot of kind of moral questions and things like that in this episode that I think are pretty, interesting to explore.
Yeah, the episode starts off with a woman who's like a high-powered executive. We later discover that she's a CEO of I think it's a cosmetics company.
Correct.
Which is kind of sexist, but whatever. So she gets like this pain. During a meeting where she basically like pulls together this deal out of her ass that's gonna make the company like $1 billion more. Yeah. She sits there the whole time. You can tell she's kind of uncomfortable, but she like grits through it. But then like at the end of the meeting, after everyone leaves, she tells her assistant to get her a doctor because she can't. Her leg hurts and she can't move it.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So we cut to the hospital. And we discover, they're talking about it, and they basically say, it could be exactly what happened to House, where he has like a blood clot and it'll like destroy function in his leg and turn him into like a miserable asshole.
Right.
Or it could be, I can't remember what the other thing they thought was.
Well, Foreman brings up herniated disc.
Yeah, that's what it was.
But Allison Cameron, she expertly molds them to her opinion, where she says, "Oh, Eric, don't you think that if she had this, herniated disc, she'd be presenting with pain elsewhere?" And then she says to Robert, and Robert isn't a blood clot the most dangerous. House sees exactly what she's doing.
He like immediately calls her out on like reading some kind of self-help book to help you manipulate people or be more care.
Yeah, she's clearly feeling a little self-conscious about her role in the team, and she wants to be a little more assertive, I guess.
Yeah, we later discover the real reason, which is just that she feels that as a woman who's attractive, no one listens to her, which I don't know if it's that so much as that she just really isn't all that. She doesn't bring anything to the team, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, her
and Chase basically don't do anything.
That's what I was gonna say. Her and Chase, I think, and Chase, Chase shines in this episode, but in a bad way.
Yeah, so House, he calls her out on this, but then he ends up ultimately doing what she asked him to, which is they order an angioplasty to get a look at the vein on the leg to see if there's a clot in there. And then so we see, Chase goes to get, and he tells the intern, he goes, "Oh, go ahead and do this, and then get it back to me."
Yeah, and he's kind of flirting with her, talking about going skiing in Stott or something like that.
Yeah, just like, "Oh, how about a drink first?"
Right.
And I think they give her like a blood. They started on blood thinners for this already because that's the most likely dangerous thing.
Right.
And then kind of in the on the other, we see like a subplot, blooming like a beautiful flower, where we find out that a billionaire has paid $100 million to as a donation to the hospital, and part of his conditions was that he would have to be the chairman of the board.
Right. Chai McBride.
I don't remember his character's name, but yeah, he basically like
Edward
has this long
Volker.
speech. Okay, he has a speech about how like he became a success in a business, and like his father was disappointed in him the whole time. And then he finally he sold his company for $1 billion, and he went to go talk to his father, but his father had advanced Alzheimer's and couldn't even recognize him. So at least that's the pretense he has, or in his speech, for as to why he bought the hospital. But
Right.
later it kind of seems like he kind of just feels that he can use it to like use business knowledge to make medicine more efficient. Mm-hmm. We find some pretty shocking things about this.
Oh yeah.
Like we find out that House's department costs $3 million a year.
Yeah, it's not making the hospital any money at all.
And they say they basically cure one patient, at a time,
Yeah.
which is hilarious because that's the entire premise of the show.
Right. So, like, yeah, the premise of the show is there's basically no patients we don't see. He cures one patient a week, and they have four very highly qualified doctors on payroll for that. So they're billing their insurance. Like they're
That's why they do all these tests.
yeah, exactly. But they're probably billing maybe $1,000 a week for their department, and each of them is making far more than that.
That's why they're trying to get him into the clinic as well, so they can make actual money.
Right. But Cuddy points out that it's prestigious for the hospital to have him, as House points out, because this, Foreman says, "Hey, how'd this case get to you? This is not a very interesting case." And he says, "Well, she's the CEO, as you pointed out, she's the CEO of this cosmetic company, and all of her assistants researched who the best doctor that they could take her to was, and it turns out it's me."
Right. Yeah, so the patient, they do the angioplasty. She keeps saying, she goes, "I run, I exercise a lot. I don't know why I'm, having this weird like pain and that sort of."
Right.
We didn't see. Jeez, I'm trying to remember the sequence of this show because they get to her diagnosis pretty quickly in this episode.
Yeah, not quite yet, but yeah, they do get to it fairly quickly.
Is it at this point that House recognizes the error that occurred?
I'm trying to think. The test, I remember the test comes back, the angio comes back, and they say it's negative, so she doesn't have a blood clot in her leg. And then I'm trying to remember what the next diagnosis they go to. Oh, Foreman comes in.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, but I just remember what it was.
Foreman comes in, and he's basically he sticks his head in, and he's like, "Hey, looks like everything's cool. We haven't found anything wrong, so we're gonna discharge you tomorrow." And he's like, "Hey, are you okay?" Because he didn't get a response, and she's just
that's right.
clutching her leg, fucking screaming in horrific pain.
Right. Yeah, they say that her pain was at a 10 on the pain chart, which
Right.
yikes! I don't even want to think about that.
Right.
And then House suspects it's preferred pain, and due to her medical history and her age, he thinks that she has colon cancer because I guess her mother had died of colon cancer.
Yeah, exactly.
So then, I'm not trying to be funny here, but I mean, as far as cancer goes, I would think that even a oncologist would have a subspecialty, especially someone who is the head of a department. But it seems like Wilson just knows about every single kind of cancer. He's does that sound reasonable to you?
I would think that. I'm not.
Because I believe the current thought, I could be wrong, is that it's actually a different collection of diseases, not just one thing you can cure. It's just different diseases that have the same characteristics. Correct.
Yes, that is the current theory that that's being explored right now. And I do believe, I'm not entirely sure, but I'm almost positive. I do believe that that oncologists subspecialize in different kinds, especially what you would think lung leukemia. There are the leukemias and the lymphomas alone there's different variations and things like that, and
Sure.
it's there's different chemotherapies, there's different types of
I
radiation and
mean,
things
I
like that.
suppose it's not unreasonable for one doctor to know all that, though. I mean, if it's the same, basically, kind of, type of disease.
Yeah.
But well, regardless, but yeah, Wilson's here, and he wants to do a colonoscopy, but she's really against that because I think she doesn't want somebody to see her.
Yeah, she says she doesn't want to be looked at.
That's right. And then like so then we she does a virtual a virtual colonoscopy, which I
Mm.
don't know how that works or whatever, but they say it's a lot less invasive, but it's very expensive. But of course, she has the money for it because she's a CEO of like a major company.
Yeah, I think the way that he described it, I didn't even know this was a thing, but I think the way he described it is it's a series of images. So you don't have to actually have anything put in you or anything like that. It's basically just a series of, I don't know if they're MRIs or X-rays or what kind of imaging they're using, but going up the entire colon. Now, I mean, I guess
Yeah,
that
that's what he was saying.
works. I don't
Yeah,
know.
I think what it was is like it's a virtual. I think whatever it was, but yeah, I think they just stitch all the images like into a 3D image, and you could rotate around and stuff. I would imagine.
Yeah, something like
And
that.
this was like 10 years ago, so I imagine if such technology is real, it's even more advanced now.
Well, I know now they have this thing where you can just shit in a box and send it in, and they'll tell you if you got colon cancer.
Jeez.
There's some sort of, I've seen commercials for it. There's some sort of new test, I guess, if it's this specific kind of colon cancer, and it's like 85% accurate, but it never gives a false negative. So if it says you're negative, then it's 100% that you're negative for it.
For this, that seems like a terrible idea for so many reasons.
Yeah, I know.
But yeah, so the colonoscopy comes back that she doesn't have anything. She's clear of that too. But then House realizes that Chase did the angioplasty wrong because again he goes to think that it's a blood clot that they didn't catch somehow, and sure enough she has two left legs. So
Yep.
it turns out that the wrong leg was angioplasty.
Yeah.
So he basically tells Chase what a douchebag he is, but then he looks at the form and it turns out that the intern was told to do it by Chase, and he's just annoyed that Chase wouldn't do it himself because he's very hands on. Well, he's really not hands on, to be honest with you. He just has his trusted associates do everything, I guess.
Right.
Maybe that's like that's why he's so hard on them, is because like that's the closest he feels comfortable to being to a patient. Like maybe like the whole sadness of the experience is really bothering to him. Who knows? Or maybe
Yeah.
really just to save people.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so
Yeah,
Chase
so
is
it's
like,
basically like
oh, good.
oh yeah, so it's like part of himself failed, and like he just doesn't trust it anymore. So he goes and has Foreman do the angioplasty.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. So Foreman does the angio, and it turns out it's still clean.
Yeah, but during the procedure, she starts going into like almost like or it's a respiratory arrest because
Yep.
and then House sees her when she's like by herself, and he notices she has all these cuts on her.
Yeah. Well, he looks at the whiteboard, and because he's
Because he's thinking other things that could cause this, and he goes to psych issues.
yeah, and because he found out that she only let Wilson do a virtual colonoscopy, and he's like, she likes she doesn't mind tests, but she doesn't like embarrassing tests or invasive tests. And as he's doing the psych symptoms things, he writes on the board the title of the episode, Control. And so he goes and looks, like you said, and he finds some very even, obviously done with razor blade cuts up on her thigh. So she's a cutter. Part of the reason probably why she didn't want to get looked at. And from this, he determines that she's going to need a new heart.
Did he spot the other thing when he was doing this? I don't remember if he did or not, because I didn't even think to look until I realized what it was.
I don't remember if he. I know. I don't remember if he goes into her purse and finds it. I think maybe he does, or he just
Yeah, but-
or he just theorizes it. One of the two.
Yeah, either way, he goes and tells this to Wilson, and he goes, "Well, I can't tell you what the issue is because I need you to, I can't
Mm-hmm.
cloud your judgment when you're, because she's going to need a transplant, and you're on the transplant board, so I
Mm-hmm.
can't tell you this. I just can't tell you."
Yep.
And then he says like a certain set of variables would indicate she needed a transplant, and sure enough,
Mm-hmm.
his team comes up and goes, "Oh, well, she's going to get a transplant," and they say exactly, why is the reason is what he just said is what they say,
Mm-hmm.
and then like Wilson kind of gives him a look.
Yeah, and he says they said we're going to put her on the transplant list, and he goes, she's already on it.
Right. Yeah. So then he goes to the woman and he goes basically he goes you're a bulimic,
Mm-hmm.
and the reason he thinks that is because he thinks that the syrup of Epicac, which as he says is great. Like I always hear you should have that, though knock on wood I never have. Hopefully I'll never need it. It's a vomit inducing liquid. That's apparently just so I don't know what the mechanism is, but it's from what I've heard it's so disgusting smelling it just makes you throw up.
Yeah.
But I guess it's according to this at least, it's a very harsh chemical that can really destroy like your nervous tissue and your muscle tissue, and that's what happened to her heart. Is he finds out from her she's been taking it 3 times a week to throw up, and then that's what ruined it.
This is how Karen Carpenter died.
Was it with
Epicac? Yeah.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah. Karen Carpenter was also a bulimic, and she used Epicac to to vomit, and ingesting this chemical over and over again. It leads to degeneration of muscle, and it doesn't. Even though there are different types of muscle, it doesn't differentiate. So even though because the heart's a muscle, it leads to that as well, and it severely weakened her heart to the point that eventually, even though she had gotten off of it and was trying to get better, she suffered a cardiac arrest and died. That's how Karen Carpenter died.
Jeez. Yeah, I had heard it was from a heart attack. I didn't know the details though. But yeah, so House basically has already told Wilson that he's that something's up. He doesn't say exactly what it was. So they go to this committee before the transplant committee.
Well, he goes to her first, and this is maybe it's one of the best scenes in the episode, maybe the best scene in the episode, where he says to her, like you said, he says, I know you're bulimic, I know you've been taking Epicac, this is what it's done, and he says, you're not, if you don't get a heart transplant, you're gonna die, but you're a bulimic, that's a psych symptom, it's a major psychiatric symptom, it's a major risk. And I am ethically bound to disclose that to the transplant committee unless, I decide not to. And, she's kind of just sitting there like trying to take it all in. And she says, well, what do you want? Do you want like a bribe or whatever? And he's like, he gets pissed. And he's like, yeah, he basically says, I want to know that your life means something to you. That if I do this, because I could get, fired, I could lose my license, I could even go to, jail possibly. That if I do this, that it's worth it, that you want to live. And she does kind of break down and cry and make, she becomes vulnerable for, a brief period and says that she does want to live. So then, yeah, he goes to the transplant committee, with Wilson and Cuddy there and some other doctors too.
Yeah, then like I said, Volger shows up, and so House is like, Cuddy is, clearly doesn't want to get in trouble, especially not in front of Volger. So she's like asking him, all the, he gives all the criteria that she checks off, and she goes, "Is there anything else?" He goes, "No, there's nothing else." But then she goes, "Well, you put her on the list before your medical team, confirmed this diagnosis. Are you sure you're not disclosing something else?" And he goes, just blatantly, flat out lies and says, "No, everything's fine."
Yep. Yeah, because at first he's very very evasive with his answers. Like she says, "Is there?" She asks a very open-ended question. Is there anything on the exclusion list that would exclude her from getting a heart? And he's like, no, nothing. Like he goes through like a list, like you said, where he's like, she's got no this, she's got no that, she's got no, like he lists all the things that she doesn't have. And she's like, what about psych symptoms? Depression. He goes, she's a little blue, but turns out she needs a heart.
Right,
So.
right.
So yeah, like he very much avoids it, and then she finally just says, "Hey, yes or no? Is there anything that you know that would exclude her from getting a heart?" And he lies and says no.
Right.
Now Chase is pissed at House this episode and decides that he's going to, like, he thinks it's weird that House knew what happened before it happened. Foreman, in a rare display of not really thinking about it, although I honestly don't think he really cares that much, as long as they got to the diagnosis. But he's like, oh, he always figures this shit out. And Chase is like, yeah, but he's always rubbing it in our faces. And so he goes and looks in at the where she works, and finds a bottle of Ipecac in her desk or whatever.
Right. Yeah. So he basically, Cuddy knows. She kind of figures out. Wilson, of course, knows that he, had lied.
Yep.
And then somehow Volger kind of picks up it as well, because Volger, House is playing Bob O'Reilly, and right before he says the good part, Volger shows up, and he basically, they basically have a discussion without openly saying what happened there.
Yeah, exactly.
And then the House calls it a dance. Then eventually Volger gets up and leaves. He goes, House tells him, he goes, yeah, I have tenure. You basically are the chairman. You almost own the hospital. He goes, but I have tenure, so it's like a stalemate. And he goes, he goes, Cuddy and Wilson would not. You have to get a unanimous decision to vote me out. And Cuddy and Wilson are both on the board. They would never vote me out. And then. Then Volger goes, actually, it's actually quite a bit easier to get rid of a person on the board than it is to, get everyone on the board to agree.
This podcast is part of the Big Heads Media Podcast Network. Go to bigheadsmedia.com for more great podcasts.
I understand what you're saying, but I'll get rid of Cuddy and fucking Wilson from the board, and then you'll have no one to protect you.
Yeah. So that they have this, setting up this conflict. House brings the woman some fried chicken from the cafeteria for some reason.
Yep.
Because he goes, you're gonna have to be on a very strict diet. That shouldn't be too hard for you. Cause you're
right.
Or maybe he says it will be hard, but yeah. So yeah, it's everything works out in the end, except for we don't know what happens to Volger. I like this episode. I like the character of Volger. I'm looking forward to seeing future confrontations with House, which I'm sure. I think you said he's again 6 episodes or so.
Yeah, it's most of the rest of this season. He's in. Part of me kind of wishes that he would be in it more, but another part of me is like, what they do in the story arc they do is satisfying enough, so they didn't really need to push it. But I do like the back and forth between the two of them, and we definitely get more of it in the next episode, which is another episode I think you'll like a lot. But yeah, this is a good episode. I think probably one of the best from season 1. And we will look forward to more Vogler next week.
Yep.
But that is our episode for the night. As always, tell friends if you want to contact the show, massivelatefee@gmail.com. You can find us on Twitter, Facebook, MySpace, any place on the internet that exists. We're there. We're on 4chan or whatever. I don't know.
Oh, I hope not.
No, we're not. But
that was another segment we used to have for one time when you read 4chan.
Yeah, that's the only time in my life I've actually been on 4chan and read anything on 4chan. It was horrifying.
You're on a list now, and you actually got off relatively mild.
Yeah. Well, maybe we'll revisit that at some point. Looking up 4chan for an episode here or there.
We should have an episode where I have a playlist of messed up videos, and you have to watch them. And we'll put in a playlist so people can follow along.
It would be as much torture as if we did all the Star Wars commentaries.
Yeah, I would be late for all those, I think.
Yeah.
I didn't mean mess up gross. I meant just hilarious.
Oh, okay. I thought you meant the Human Centipede or something like that.
Oh no! Have you ever seen the clip of Todd Barry on the Louis? I think it's called Louis, the Louis C.K. show.
I don't think so. No, I like Todd Barry though.
He's actually coming into town soon, but it was really funny. It was he was talking about you just watch it. It's just I think it's called Me on Louis, but if you look up Todd Barry Louis it should come right up. And it's like this like really bizarre, like just watch it. It's so hilarious.
Okay, I definitely will.
All right, well, yeah. So that's our show for this week. We'll see you next time.
All right, bye.